Hello, my name is Dr. Emily Cash, and I'm a licensed psychologist with St. Luke Institute. Today I'll be talking a little bit about interpersonal health and the way stress that we are all likely experiencing, given these challenging, uncertain, and intense times we're all experiencing, can impact our relationships. I suspect that for a lot of us, the knowledge of the global pandemic grew initially. There was this rush of adrenaline, a sense of kind of being together, being united in the face of this global crisis. The situation, or so we thought, felt temporary. And it is still temporary, but how long temporary is up for debate. This settling in no longer feels like an acute experience of stress. It has begun to feel chronic. And we know this current experience of stress, the social distancing will last longer, is bound to last longer. Stress is a tricky thing. It impacts our emotional health, our physical health and wellness, and it really impacts our relationships. Some of us might notice a change in our emotional health, feelings of anxiety, irritability, or an uptick in symptoms of depression. Some notice more of a physical manifestation of that, an increase in headaches, upset stomach, feelings of tension, or the resurgence of chronic pain issues that we struggled with in the past. We might feel less satisfied with ourselves, with others. We might find that we are feeling angry or agitated and looking for someone to blame. An increased sense of insecurity or mistrust, paranoia, towards people in our lives, towards members of your community, for example, towards leadership. For those in community life, living with your community members in such intense circumstances, there can be some unique challenges that I'd like to give voice to. For a lot of those living in community life, the last several years, many years of your community experience has been going in and out of community in terms of meeting ministerial demands, time with family, travel, etc. Certainly, community is home. But this intense experience of togetherness that you're having at this moment might actually feel abnormal. And as a result, like all of us, when we spend an intense amount of time together, we become acutely and keenly aware of the idiosyncrasies of others' behaviors. Things that get under our skin, that make us feel agitated, annoyed, frustrated. And we might notice that our likelihood to getting agitated or frustrated or irritated is very, very short. Our fuse seems to have lessened. Another dynamic that I have seen in the context of community life is just the notion that old dynamics die hard, that tensions within relationships may not achieve a lovely resolution. And during this time of intense togetherness, you might notice that some of those old dynamics are surfacing again. I've also heard that sometimes history weighs heavily in community. So we are and can notice that we are fixating on the ways in which others struggled in the past. And yet at this current moment, we are more aware of some of those historic struggles. We are unlikely to forget. And again, because of this intense experience of togetherness, all of those old dynamics, all of that old history is bubbling back up to the surface. One way this might also manifest is we tend to put people in boxes. When we feel annoyed or when we feel frustrated, we find ourselves gravitating towards thinking like, well, he always did that, or he never does this, or he's always been that way. What we do in those situations, though, is we put those people in boxes and we define them by their limitations. But we also keep ourselves trapped during those times as well. For these reasons, for this collective experience of stress that we're all under, coupled with this intense togetherness that you're experiencing with your community right now, I'd like to spend a little bit of time identifying some behaviors and patterns of thought that might help lessen these tensions and positively impact your views and the views of those with whom you're spending a lot of time. The first thing that I'd like to highlight is the importance of boundaries. Now, we hear that word thrown out a lot in terms of our physical boundaries, our emotional boundaries that we have with others. And it's a really healthy conversation to have, as when we have good and healthy boundaries in place, it positively impacts our relationship with others. It guides how we engage and how they engage with us. In this unique time, I would like you to think about two aspects to your boundaries. One is, how are you getting your own interpersonal needs met in terms of connecting with life-giving relationships, exploring and talking about your own emotional experiences with people that you trust, that love you and that support you, and how are you giving that care and compassion back to them. The other part of boundaries, though, is what are you doing to appropriately guide interactions with others with whom you have difficulty or conflict. And there's two tips I would like to highlight. The first is, how do I appropriately and gently limit exposure to individuals who trigger me? Now, I want to be clear, I'm not saying avoid. I am saying limit exposure to individuals who can trigger me, and this is two parts, and bolster your interpersonal tolerance in situations that you find triggering or activating. And what I mean by that is, when there is someone in my life that I know causes me a level of distress or annoyance or irritation, the goal is not to remove them from my life or to avoid them, but how do I better tolerate my interactions with them in such a way that I behave in a kind, caring, and compassionate way, rather than fire back with a passive-aggressive comment or a mean-spirited comment under my breath, or walk away from an interaction seething with anger and hanging on to that in a way that's ultimately destructive to me and potentially to others. At this moment, when we again know that there is this intense experience of togetherness and time with others, we want to make sure that our behavior and the model that we engage in interpersonally is one that's in line with the type of person that we want to be. So for individuals that you struggle with, how do you limit your exposure, not avoid, and bolster your interpersonal tolerance? And again, that might be as simple as a deep breath when you encounter that person, saying a prayer for them, counting to 10 before you respond. But what are you doing to make sure that how you engage with that person is congruent with the type of person that you want to be? Another boundary that you might need to find yourself setting is, folks tend to gravitate towards data, towards information, towards wanting to know what is going on. This gives us a semblance of control. The more I know about the coronavirus, the better prepared I will be. That is true to some degree, and sometimes that makes people feel, like I said, in control. For other people, that can be evocative and unhealthy. If you are one of those people that struggles with the information overload you're receiving from another person, how do you put a healthy boundary in place? A couple of suggestions, and these are things I like to call kind of comments that you can pull from your back pocket, might be, I don't want to talk about the coronavirus right now. Can we talk about something else instead? Or in a situation where someone has a very strong opinion and you disagree with it, but you don't want to be confrontational, but you'd also like to change the conversation. I respect your opinion in this situation, and I'm allowing myself to come to my own conclusions. Another suggestion might be, I know you're trying to be helpful and I appreciate it, but I need space to experience and process my own emotions about this. This is part of building that interpersonal tolerance and giving yourself some skills that will help you to prepare for interactions that you find to be difficult. Another way in which boundaries are particularly important is the boundaries that we create around ourselves. And that's really reflective of the measures that we take every day to put self-care practices into place. And there are 4 areas that every day needs some money in the bank. Your emotional health. How are you attending to and processing your feeling life? Your interpersonal needs. We talked about that just a minute ago around boundaries. Where are you getting your needs for connectedness met? How are you nurturing those life-giving relationships? Your spiritual health. What are you doing to stay connected and grounding in your spirituality and in your relationship with God? And your physical. How are you getting up and getting active every day? When we exercise, when we raise our heart rate, that has a positive impact both on our mood and our sleep, which makes us feel better. When we physically feel better, we are in an emotionally better space. If you can put some attention into these 4 spheres every single day, it contributes to a healthier you, and you become more tolerant and more compassionate to others. I'd also like to highlight a few tips and strategies just in thinking generally about keeping your kind of cognitive perspective, your headspace, in a positive, healthy place. The first thing is, how do you root yourself in a place of gratitude? I recently read a book by Louise Penny. She's a Canadian author and she writes mystery books, mystery novels. And I read mysteries as a kid, kind of took a break, but I'm back in full force and I absolutely adore her writing style, her narrative, her character development. And in a recent book that I read, she talks about a character at the beginning of the novel and his habit of counting his sums. Now, you make the assumption that he's talking about money, but later on in the book, you recognize through an interaction with another character that every day he spends time counting his blessings and how important that is for him to anchor himself in a place of gratitude. So what are you doing every day to anchor yourself in a place of gratitude? The second is a tip that I found at the University of Colorado in Boulder, where they talk about looking for bright spots and noticing landmines. They define bright spots as things that have a positive impact on our mood, our energy, and our day that we want to keep doing. And they suggest that to find those bright spots, at the end of the day, you reflect on what went well and should I keep doing that? When I feel good, when I've had a good day, what contributed to that feeling? And how do I continue to implement that? What do I do that puts me in a positive mindset? And then how do I continue to do it? So it's coupling the noticing, the insight with tangible behavior change, allowing you to shift cognitively where you are into a more healthy, more positive perspective. The other thing that they highlight, and I talk about this with my clients often, are landmines. Landmines are things that negatively impact us. They might leave us feeling drained. They impact our mood in a negative way or leave us feeling down, lousy at the end of the day. Part of the work is to uncover those landmines and reflecting upon, are there choices that I end up regretting? Making a passive-aggressive comment, ignoring someone because I'm feeling irritated at them. Because then we're left holding disappointment in ourselves, potential shame about our behavior, and we might end up having to do the work of recovering that relationship, apologizing. What choices do I end up regretting and how do they make me feel? What do I want to do differently? What makes some days more challenging than others? And maybe that's not getting enough exercise. Maybe that's varying from your routine that keeps you grounded. Maybe that's missing prayer or not making those efforts to connect with peers that you love and care about. Those behaviors that are the landmines that we're talking about, how can you engage in fewer of those things each day? And how can you prepare and predict potentially for landmines when you can't avoid them? How do you respond to difficult situations better? And I'm referring back to what we talked about earlier around interpersonal tolerance. What do I need to do a better job of managing relationships that I find to be challenging? The University of Colorado also put out this really lovely self-assessment that I've included in the handout. And what it reflects is 3 different stages of who do I want to be during the COVID-19 crisis. The first stage that they identify, they refer to as the fear zone. The second is the learning zone. And the third is the growth zone. So what am I doing every day, both in terms of my cognitive thought process, but also my behavior that reflects a place of health residing in that growth zone? What I'd encourage you to do is review the handout and look at the statements aligned with the fear zone, the learning zone, the growth zone, and reflect for yourself, where am I? Going one step deeper, what I'd also like to encourage you to do is pull back and look at your behavior in community. Will I look back and be able to say that I treated myself and others with compassion during this time? Did I make myself a blessing to those around me, to my community? It's not about being perfect. We know we're all doing the best we can. And as a result, it is about adopting a kinder, more flexible approach to yourself and to others. I hope that this has been helpful today. Thank you very much.